I'm Aaron,
And I'm Eric.
and this is the new norm. Hey everyone, welcome back to the new norm. Today we're going to be talking about the question, how are you doing? This is a question we've all asked a million times at the beginning of meetings and conversations and job interviews. And if we're really honest with ourselves, I don't know that we've ever given it much thought or given it much weight. Well, in this new normal that we're living in, the question, how are you, has some broad ranging implications. And the answers and the way the question's asked has become more impactful than ever. So today we want to talk about how we're asking the question, how we're answering the question, and how we're just dealing with how are you doing in the new norm. So, Eric, how are you doing? How are you answering this question?
It's a tough question. It seemed like it just would flow off the tongue a month and a half ago. I'm doing well. How are you? And in terms of answering the question, I think it's important to be honest, to be a little bit more vulnerable than we have in the past, because as a society, we're all going through something and we're all going through it together. And I think it's important. You don't need to open the floodgates of everything, but I think it's okay. For myself, we're doing okay. We have plenty of food, which seems like a weird way to answer that question. Um, you know, I still have a job, which is not the case for everybody. Um, but homeschool started, and that's probably the biggest level of anxiety that I've gone through is trying to manage that in a very different way than we've had to manage it before. So I think it's important to be open and honest in this situation in these times. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I'm responding, one of the hardest things to do is balancing what's good with what's challenging. I think there's a tendency in business to always want to portray things as going well. I mean, that's kind of important in business. People want to know that your business is thriving. People want to know that things are going well if they're going to be buying your product. And so there's, I believe, a tendency to lean towards the positive in answering these questions. Well, I mean, there are positives, to your point. Like, I'm spending great time with my family right now. I'm realizing how productive working from home can be. But I need to be very mindful of the fact that the person on the other line might be having a really hard time. And it's really not fair for me to just try to make it look like nothing's wrong on my end. We owe it to each other to give each other the permission to be doing horribly right now, because some of us really are. So a lot of it is about maybe not just focusing on the bad, but throwing out a couple of good things, but being very honest about the struggles. Man, it's really hard trying to talk with my wife about meaningful things when our 6-year-old is constantly looking for our attention, things like that. So yeah, I'd say just that balance is becoming so important. Um, the answer to this question, I think, is interesting, but what has changed a lot more for me is how I'm actually asking the question, how are you? So, Brooker, how has this situation changed how you ask that question?
Yeah, I think a month ago, you and I'd get on a phone, or I'd get on the phone with anybody, or a Zoom call, and I'd say, "Hey, man, how are you?" You'd say, "Great. How are you?" I'd say, "I'm great." The questions become a little bit more difficult because, again, you have to address this as again, as a society, we're going through this together, and you have to address the elephant in the room. Something to the effect of, "Hey, Aaron, with everything going on in the world today, are you doing okay?" Um, but I also think we have to be prepared when we ask for that answer. And if you don't want the answer, don't ask the question, because this is a time now more than ever that you have to ask it the appropriate way, but be understanding that the answer might come back. They might be brutally honest as to how they're actually doing. But you have to be cautious when you ask that question. But again, I haven't mastered it. I think I've struggled to get through this the last couple of weeks. How are you going about asking this question?
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what you said. The one thing I've added, the trick that I've used to sort of force myself to be a little bit more mindful in asking the question is simply pausing. People are used to, as you said, this being a question that we just barrel through. How are you? Oh, I'm doing well. How are you doing? Okay, great. Let's talk about whatever the meeting's about. Instead, when I'm starting off meetings, I ask, how are you holding up? and I pause and I give them time to both process the question, which is as big a question for them as it is for me, but also time to realize that I am truly here to hear the answer. I'm not just asking it because I'm supposed to. And that's been really helpful. I think that's led to a lot of great conversations. And frankly, it's made for more meaningful conversations, even on the business side, once we've addressed each other as human beings at the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's our thoughts on how are you doing? And we want to know how you're doing. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, we'd love to hear them in the comments section. We want this to be a conversation so that we're all learning how to exist in this new world together. With that, until next time, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Eric.
And this is The New Norm.